Before we start this video, a large thank you to Robert, Tran, Zanji, welcome back, and Rovanisi for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And an immense thank you to Halo Burner and Dark Matter for their continued support to the channel this month on Patreon. It is greatly appreciated, gentlemen, and I hope you enjoy the video. Hello everybody, today we're going to continue work with the character creation menu. So right now we have no stats for our character, except for strength, where we did 2 ending. So I'm going to go ahead and add the stats that I want to have on my character right now. So your game could be different. I'm going to use everything in Elden Ring except for Arcane. I think it's Luck in Dark Souls 3. I'm just going to exclude that. I don't plan on doing a system with that unless people really want to see it, because really it's just used for, I believe, item find, and it scales off some spells. So aside from the item find, it acts basically the same as everything else. I will use strength, dexterity, intelligence, and faith. So I'm going to make these network variables the same as our vitality, endurance, whatever, in case you want to see them for any other reason. If you're another player that's connecting, you might not want to. In Nephilim, I definitely do. So I'm going to make a new script now called CharacterClass, and we're going to delete the start and update functionality, as is per tradition. But we're also going to delete the mono behavior tag. We're going to add in our namespace. So we're doing this because we're going to make it system serializable. What do I mean by this? Well, we're going to be able to basically use this as a variable inside the inspector. So we can make, say, a list of these character classes, and then you could pick from that list which class you want. And on that list of character classes, we're going to have things like the class name, and then we're going to have the stats and the items, and we're going to make this class basically equip from selecting a button that contains this class. So public string class name, that will be basically serving 2 reasons. If you just want to like make the list auto-populate and have the buttons of different classes generate using this list, you could change the button text field to the class name, or you could just have it as an identifier if you're just setting up manually like I'm going to do. But if you want to auto-generate your class buttons, a class name would be good to just actually assign the button name. So class stats, I'm going to have vitality, stamina, mind, just basically all the stuff that we have under our character network manager is just the same thing. Make a version of it here as an integer because it can always only be whole values in my case. And then I'm going to just kind of think in my mind now, what does a class do to a character? Well, it sets their stats, it sets their equipment, so it's armor and weapons, and you can also throw an arcane look if you want to for stats. And it also sets their quick slot items. So we're going to do class information. We got class name. Then we have our class stats. Now we're going to do class weapons. And what is our class weapons? Well, we have a maximum of 3 weapons each hand. So we can include 2 lists of weapons, one for the main hand and one for the offhand, rather array or list, whatever you prefer. Just make sure it's 3 because this should match the max item slots you have identically. So if you have 4 weapon slots, make it 4. If you have 2 weapon slots, make it 2. But basically we want to just use these to assign all possible weapons in our hand. Because let's say you pick one class that has 1 weapon, and then another class that has 2 weapons. You want to override all weapons, so you're not accidentally keeping weapons from the last class. So the empty weapons, quote unquote, would just be unarmed. Now, let's make the armor, head equipment, and then body equipment, and then leg equipment, and of course hand equipment. And whatever else you have, for me it's just the 4 slots. So every piece of equipment that you have in here, you want to have a potential slot here for. So we got head, body, leg, and lastly, type it in here, hand. Cool. And now the last thing that we need is the quick slot items. So again, you're going to want to have the identical number of slots that you have. For me, I believe it is 3. I think Elden Ring might have like 9 or 10. I can't recall with Absolution. But when I did the tutorial series, I think I just made it for 3. So I'm going to use 3. Now, you're always going to start with your 2 flasks. In my case, maybe you don't want to have the character always start with those, but I'm going to. So in every character class, I'm going to make 2 out of 3 of those objects a class. And maybe you want to leave the 3rd one for if you allow your character to choose a starting item. So lastly, we need to make a public void set class. I'm looking at my notes here in Nephilim, and I actually had the functionality for this on another script, and I'm not entirely sure why. I think maybe you can't instantiate things when it's not a model behavior, but we'll see that in a moment. So 1, set the stats. 2, set the weapons. 3, set the armor. And 4, set the quick slot items. So I want to internalize this. I know a lot of you, if not all of you, know this if you're this far in the series, but programming is just a series of breaking down big problems into smaller problems and solving them. So creating a class sounds so scary at first to some people, but then if you just say, well, I'm just setting a vitality level, well, I'm just setting a stamina level. Well, I'm just setting my weapons. Well, I'm just setting my armor. If you break it down to all those smaller parts like that, the problem really becomes not so scary. I'm going to rename that to endurance, by the way, because it wasn't actually stamina. Stamina is the name of the pool. Endurance is the name of the stat. But yes, if you break it down into smaller parts like that, it really becomes not scary at all. That's why I always encourage people to stop and pause and do it on their own, because if you think about it, that's what helps writing out the steps. It really isn't that bad. So let's set all of our stats like so. And after we set the stats, we can move on to the weapons. And if you're feeling brave, pause the video now and go ahead and continue this on your own. And you can try to set it up on your own. If you want, keep watching, but if you want to go ahead and pause. If you run into a problem with instantiating stuff on this, it's because it's not a mono behavior, and I believe we're going to have to move this function. So let's do the weapons. So if we go over to our save menu, you can see here what we're doing for weapon. Well, we're setting our weapon in our hand, and then we're setting the ID. Now, why is that? Because in our save, we're going to save stuff to our weapon, like, our Ashes of War and stuff. We don't want to instantiate a brand new weapon, which is why we set it manually in our hand and then load it afterwards. So we're going to do the same thing here. Even though we're not setting Ashes of War and weapons, you might want to, though, so just in case. And then we're going to set the network variable afterwards, so when we load into a game, if someone joins us, they will get a correct representation of which weapon model we are in fact holding. So we can copy and paste this, and instead of referencing our current character save data, we just instantiate, and I was right, we cannot instantiate on this. Let me just test. I think it's because this is not a mono behavior. So what I'm going to do, just real quick, is scroll up and just see. Let's make this a mono behavior again. And will the instantiate turn? Yes, okay. So we just have to move this function, basically. We can't call instantiate on something that doesn't have mono behavior. So I am going to take everything out of this function, and we're just going to basically use this on our title screen function. So let's go over here to the title screen manager, and let's come down right to the bottom, and let's make a new comment for the character creation stuff for character class. Then make a public void set class or set character class. And by the way, you can make like a title screen character creation manuscript if this is too crowded for you. But since we're only going to have the character creation menu and the main menu stuff on the screen, I'm just going to keep it all in this one class. But feel free if you want to, if it makes more sense to you. Now under set class, it's called title screen manager.instance, and then just call that new function we created. And we're going to have to pass a bunch of variables, but let's not worry about that right at this moment. Let's just go declare the variables on that function. So over here on the character class, you can see we have vitality and endurance. Basically, you want to make a comma here and just make it be required to pass all of these variables. So we have vitality, endurance, vitality, endurance, mind, and strength. And then we have dex and faith, intelligence and faith. So make an int here. And if it starts going off screen, just kind of, if you want to space them out so they come down more, just hit enter. So let's check these variables here. I think with the weapons next, so I'll go grab those. Main weapons and offhand weapons. Just going to grab this so the names are identical. And I'm going to do this a bit quicker and do some pausing and clever editing here for future sebs, so I'm not wasting too much of your time. So off weapons, head equipment, body equipment. Then we got leg equipment. Then we have hand equipment. All right, and that's basically it. Oh, and the quick slot items. Almost forgot about those. So basically every single variable that you have on the character class, the serializable script, you want to make sure you're requiring it here for set class so we can actually set the information. All right, that's everything. So we've set the weapons, we've repositioned our functionality here. Now we can instantiate main hand weapons 1 and 2. So again, if you're confused, we're just setting the weapons in our character's inventory from the weapons we have on the character class script that we've just created. So the reason why we have it serializable is because you can make this now as a variable in our title screen manager or your character creation manager, whatever script you want. And then you can just reference those individual classes as variables. So you can make a knight class, a ranger class, a pyromancer class. And then let's just set our weapon by going and copying the code from the player save manager here. And we can just edit this player.player inventory. And then player.player network manager becomes, and instead of referencing our weapons and right hand slots from our character data, we just reference the weapon index 0 because it's going to be at 0 because we're just making a class now. And then we do the same thing for our offhand or left hand, whatever you want to call it. And that's basically it for our weapons, I do believe, unless I'm missing something. We'll see when I test it, but I think this is it. Now let's right becomes left, and we're good. So now the armor. Now the armor, we do have to do a null check. So let's just yoink it here from our save data. And I'm going to do a couple here and then use the magic of video editing to just fast forward so I'm not wasting too much time here. Try to condense this shorter than 25 minutes if I can. So, head equipment. We're not checking to get it from a list, and we can rename this variable to equipment. Since we already have head equipment, we can just check, is the head equipment null? Because maybe with every class you don't want to start off with head equipment. And if the head equipment is not null, we're going to instantiate a copy of it by just instantiating head equipment. And then we're going to say player inventory manager head equipment is equal to the equipment item that we just instantiated. Otherwise, we're going to say player inventory manager head equipment is equal to null because there is no head equipment in this class. Maybe you have one that doesn't start with a helmet or something. There you go. And now we can copy this and do the same thing with body, legs, and hand. So for body, just change the keyword for head to body. And your local variable equipment can stay the same because that name is just like, it can be used for all of these. That's why I made it so general. So it's one less thing to kind of change the name of. And that's it. And now we do the same thing for legs and hands, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I have head, body, legs, and hands. I made some comments here so it's very clear. And then right at the last line of code, we have to actually equip all of these. So if we go to our save manager or our player manager, you can see down here, we call player equipment manager dot equip armor. Let's just call that too, right on the last line of code here. So we're going to say player equipment manager dot equip armor. And then set the quick slot items. So let's do that. Where is our quick slot stuff to? Here we go. So we can copy and yoink this here from the loading portion on our player manager, and we can just say player dot quick slot item indexing equals 0 because it hasn't changed yet. We haven't started the game. Unless you want to start off at 1 for some weird reason, or 2. I don't know. But mine's gonna be 0. And then quick slot items 0 becomes quick slot items 0, and then 1 becomes 1, 2 becomes 2. Now, very important though, make sure you're always making this array the same size as the array that it can be, again, on your player. So if you make your maximum quick slots 2, make it 2. If it's 3, make it 3. Otherwise, you should do a check here to make sure the size or length matches, because if not, you'll get an error if it doesn't match. I'm not going to do that check because I want it to always be the exact same size. And if it's broken, I want to notice. So I'm just going to reference the index here, and we're good. That's basically it for our equipment. I'm just going to give this a quick, this should be not we're not using the local variable for equipment, so do that. So when we set it, head equipment should be equipment, body equipment should be equipment, leg equipment should be equipment because we're instantiating it. It's a copy. You don't need to if you're doing it just like Elden Ring, but if you change your armor in any way on the scriptable object, you should always instantiate it. All right, so let's come back to the character class and pass all of these variables. We have player, vitality, endurance, mind, strength, dexterity, intelligence, faith. If you didn't notice, by the way, every time I hit a comma, it will actually bold the text of the variable you are passing right now, so it makes it easier to see. So you can see main hand weapons is bolded out now. If I pass main hand weapons and then go off to offhand weapons, that one becomes bolded. Every time you hit a comma, go to the next variable, just in case you have a bunch of variables that are ints, you're not sure in what order to pass them in. If you're scared you're doing it in the wrong order, it will always bold the text of the one you're currently on. All right, save that. Go over to the title screen manager, and now let's make a new header below here for classes. And we can make a public classes. We can just do serializable field if you want to as well, depending on where you're going to call this from. Character classes array, and we call this starting classes. Okay, so I'm not going to initialize that because I'm going to save that now. We're going to go right into the project. You can see here, boom, starting classes. Now if I hit 2, I'm just going to do 2 so we can make sure it works. Element 0 and element 1, cool. Now if I change the name of this class, so this one's going to be Knight, you will see that the name element 0 becomes Knight. Easier to see. And now you can just set up all your classes right here like that. I just find this is so much more convenient. You could do it like with the hard code way, I suppose, quote unquote, where you set up a bunch of variables and weapons that are predetermined. But having the actual class as a variable, I like a lot more. So vitality, I'm going to do just one class here on camera, and I'm going to do the other one off camera. So set up all the weapons. I'm not sure why this array did not initialize as 3 defaultly, because we did set it to 3 in the code. But anyway, I'm going to put all of my items and armor in here, making sure to use unarmed weapons in the slots that don't have weapons. And a quick slot, health flask, and mana flask is all I'm going to do, and leave the other one blank. All right, let's go to the title screen manager, disable it real fast, and enable our character creation menu. Not sure why my player UI is loading screen is showing up over that right now. Temporarily disable that. So we need to make the submenu. We also need to declare what these buttons do. So we want it so we hit class, it's going to open up a submenu. So let's go to the title screen manager now. And I am going to make a function. So you see we have open character creation menu and close character creation menu. We're going to do something similar, but instead of opening a whole new menu, we're going to do a submenu. And this is why this might get, for some of you, a little bit unruly, but I don't find this as messy or confusing to me because it makes sense. But if you want to give the character creation menu its own script, so this is not all in one place, by all means go for it. So open, choose character class submenu, and close, choose character class submenu. So what are we doing here? Well, we want to disable all the main menu buttons, enable the submenu, and auto select the first button. What do I mean by disable all main menu buttons? Well, character name, character class, and start game, you don't want to be able to accidentally click those. When you go to your submenu, you only want to be able to click the buttons where you select the class. And likewise, closing the character class submenu, we re-enable all of our main menu buttons, and then we're going to disable the submenu object, and then we're going to auto select the choose class button because that's the last button we selected to actually open the choose class menu. So comments, we can do this one by one. To disable all main menu buttons, we need references to all main menu buttons. So we have buttons here already, as you can see. This is for our actual main menu. So if you wanted to, like I said, you go down here and you could make a title screen character creation. I'm not going to do this, by the way, but you could just do this like you would before. You know, create an ad, and you could reference that from our title screen manager, or you can make it a singleton because it's the only one in the game. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to make this main menu. And then I'll make a comment for character creation menu, and I'll basically make all my variables with these names in mind. So main menu buttons now. And then we have main menu pop-ups and main menu menus. So next, down below here, I can take this kind of button list here and copy it. And main menu buttons, I could call this character or main panel buttons for the character creation menu. Think of, again, character name, character class, start game. So we got character name button, and obviously it will become more clear when you look at the names of the variables. Character class button. And start game button. So we want to disable all these, and since we could be doing this in the future more times, we could just make a nice little script for it. Function for it, sorry. Private void toggle character creation screen main menu buttons. And we could pass a bool for the status of the buttons, and all we want to do is say main menu, character name button dot enabled is equal to status, and then character class buttons equal to status, and start game buttons equal to status. So all your buttons, and status just means true or false, obviously. So if we pass this and set it to true, we're going to set them all to true. If we set it to false, they'll all be set to false. Now we can use this function on both of these toggle character creation screen main menu buttons, disabling them false, and then in the second function for re-enabling them true. Cool. Disable the submenu object and enable the submenu object. We don't have that yet. We have no submenu object created, so let's make a variable for it. I'm going to make another little header here to try to keep it as organized as I can. I'm also going to rename this to character creation main menu panel buttons, or main panel. So main panel is left, secondary panel is the middle panel, in case you didn't remember. If you want to change the name to something more clear to you, that's cool too. This is very clear to me. Make it make sense to you. Let's go ahead and grab a game object variable, and let's name this character class menu. Now this doesn't exist yet in our game either, but we have the variable now, so we can enable and disable it. Now auto select first button. You can do this two ways. You can use your handy dandy select button on enable script that we made before, or if you're going to auto populate the list by generating the character class buttons, depending on how many classes you have, you want to select the first button. So we'll do that as if we were generating it. We're not, but we're going to do it that way. So we can say character class button dot select here when we close the menu. And then we're going to say character class button on select null. Again, I'm not sure if this is still a thing, but sometimes it wouldn't play the on select events unless you did this with old versions of Unity. I never tested if it works, but like playing sound effects and stuff, it just wouldn't work sometimes. So I'm just going to call that. You might not need to call that on null. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say character creation. We're going to make a list of buttons here for character classes. So character class buttons, and we can just call this character creation class buttons or class panel buttons. And then we're going to auto select the first one. So we're going to do if character class buttons.length is greater than 0, just in case it's not, but it always should be, obviously. We're going to select button 0 by saying button 0.select. And again, if you have like playing sound effects on select, highlighting something, on some older versions of Unity, it wouldn't play, so you have to use onSelect.null. This might be fixed. I have not validated that for myself, and now I'm going to save it. So that looks good. Now we want to call open choose character menu here on our class. When we click the button, we want to go over here and then title screen manager, open character class submenu. And that will open the submenu. So I'm going to duplicate the main menu object and put it to our middle panel here. I'm going to hit 0 on the position X so it centers it perfectly. I'm going to leave the Y alone so it matches the height of my other panel. Looks nice on the eyes. I'm going to call this class menu options. Actually, I'm going to check the variable name because I'm going to call it the exact same name as the variable. So in the future, if it becomes unlinked, I'm not confused. What did I call it? I called it character class menu. It's right down there. So I'm actually going to rename this variable to character class menu. Just in case if it ever becomes unlinked somehow. It should never do that, but then it'll be easier to find again. Okay, so we can eradicate two of these buttons and we can repurpose this name button. So I'm going to call this class 0, or you can call it night, or whatever you want to do. Again, if you're planning on auto instantiating these buttons and populating the list, automatically, depending on how many classes you have, then it won't matter. I'm going to make a public void for select class. I'm going to pass an int for class ID. This is on title screen manager. We're going to get our player by doing our trick, network manager singleton local client.player object get component player manager. If starting class's length is less than or equal to 0, we're going to simply return. That's a problem. And then otherwise here, we're going to say starting classes. We're going to pass the class ID dot set class, and we pass the player. So what does this do? Well, we're just referencing the array of starting classes, and we're going to choose one based on the ID. That's it. Let me close choose character class submenu. All right, the first one's night, so I'm going to rename this night. I'm just going to use all caps because for some reason it looks better with this font. On click, want to go to the title screen canvas, select class, and pass the ID 0 because that's our night. Why is that 0? Well, let's go to our class variables real quick. You can see here we have 2, 0 is night, and 1 is ranger because it is position 1 in the array for night, so it's 0. Ranger's position 2, so it is 1. All right, class 0 and 1, change that to 1. Going to name the text field to Ranger. Again, I'm going to use all caps because it looks much better for some reason with this font. I am going to drag in my class buttons now, 0 and 1, like so. And then I am going to drag in my name variable, my class button variable, and my start game button variable. Am I missing anything? I think I'm missing nope, that's good. I am going to now disable my character class menu object. I think I'm forgetting something though. Disable my main menu or my character creation class, re-enable the main menu, and re-enable my player UI. Let's save that. I'm just going to check over some stuff. So I did forget something. Remove the select button on enable scripts from your classes if you're doing it my way. And also we can add an on select so you can preview the class. When you scroll over it, you don't have to click it. So add an event trigger on select and then just call the select class. And make sure you pass the same value. So title screen manager, select class 0. Do the same thing, copy component, paste it under your next class, but replace 0 with 1 or whatever the ID is for your other classes. And now we can test this. Let's see if I forgot something. I did. Come to quick slots, check for null. If quick slot items 0 is null, don't try to instantiate a null object. There's nothing there. So if it does not equal null, instantiate it. Otherwise, there's nothing there. Okay. So checking for null on 0, 1, and 2. Looks good. Save it. Going to space these out a bit. All right, back to the game. Let's press play. Start. New game. Class. Okay, it's not opening menu. It looks like it's auto-selecting a class. I know why. So we're just closing the menu as soon as we open it because we're doing it on select. Make a function for preview class. Make it exactly the same as select class, but erase the close character class submenu. And now switch set class on select with preview class. You don't instantly close out when you select the button. That's very silly of me. Now it should work. Now save, go back. Here we go. Yeah, there we go. Looking good. So now if I hit the Ranger class and start game, I should start the game with my bow and my different helmet and my stats and such. And there it is, working as intended. Very cool. So the lighting looks weird. Did I break it somehow? I just got a weird memory of that lightning breaking, and I think there might be something going on there. But if that happens again, I will investigate it further. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed and hope you learned something. Now you have a way to switch your character's equipment and gear. So if you want me to, this is very important, comment below if you want me to, because if not, I will move on. I can go over how to change stuff like hairstyles and different body parts. If you have a model that does so, I'll show you how I do it in my workflow. But keep in mind, everybody's is going to be a little bit different depending on how your model is set up. But you can still use a logic that I would apply with mine, with yours, most likely. So a shout out again to my patrons. It is genuinely because of each and every one of you, past, present, and future, that the series has continued and will continue. So for that, you have my sincerest gratitude. We're going to continue on with the series next week. So let me know if you want to see more character creation menu stuff. If not, we're going to move on to making a mock-up level, some level design and optimization tips, and stuff like that. All right, guys, that's it for me. I'll see you next week.